Okay, welcome. I'm Scott Hicks,
This is Jeremy Quick.
and we are going to do a little bit of demonstration today of the kind of work that we engage in for the spiritualization of thinking, or all of the parts that are involved in that, going from everyday consciousness, seeing what a mental image is, carefully looking at that, and trying to approach pure thinking, where we think with no images, and then going to the border of the spirit and understand how thinking can lead us in an anthroposophical path the whole way from everyday consciousness to spiritual thinking. And we're going to use the concept of a right angle. And a right angle, we're going to think it through, discuss it together, and use the framework of the 10 Aristotelian categories to completely think this through, and also adding in the Hegelian categories of nothingness and becoming, in order to have 12 ways that we can look at this concept.
And why we use Aristotelian categories? Well, first of all, we want our thinking to be as active, as clear, as powerful as we can possibly get it going like that. And for our work, we notice, especially when Scott is like guiding me to become a real thinker, that these 10 categories are really truly putting you into that activity, because many times you might think you think, but actually you are just dreaming or meditating or using your will or other forces. And you can apply this method to any object whatsoever. It can be a bird, or it can be a Saturn evolution, or it can be sunshine. And just work with these 10 to 12 categories and see how it makes you alive in your thinking. And then Scott and I demonstrate how to turn from that everyday thinking into seeing what is actually happening behind the curtains of our daily consciousness, so that we would not only have knowledge, perhaps even truth of something, but we can actually observe that truth, that knowledge process firsthand, directly, so we know that what we think is truth according to this plane we call IP, or
The idealist plane. I mean, looking at ideas, seeing the knowledge process as it's taking place. So observing pure thinking as it's taking place, as is outlined in the Philosophy of Freedom by Rudolf Steiner. So we're following this path quite clearly, and let's give it a shot.
all right.
So starting off with the concept of a right angle, and I think we want to start with quantity. Let's start off with quantity and go to being toward the end. So how can we think of the right angle in a quantitative way?
Well, right angle is 90 degrees, right? So that's one quantity there. If it was more or less, it wouldn't be right angle. Also, we could say that there is only one right angle, the idea of right angle itself. On the other hand, we could say, in perhaps, I don't know, everywhere you are, you could see in physical reality something that would be called approximately a right angle.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So 90 degrees. We have only one for the concept of a right angle, but actually we see all around us in physical life, in construction, 90-degree angles everywhere. And so it would have two. Also, I guess the number two, because you got two
Exactly.
sides that are coming together. But the other sides could be a wide variety of other shapes that could finish off the form. Could be a triangle, could be a square, could be pentagon, could be other things like that. So
Yeah, so that's about quantity. What about quality?
Okay, quality. That's kind of interesting for a right angle because it seems like it's a mathematical object, but the
Uh-huh.
quality it has, I mean, okay, it could be turned this way or this way, but I think it has the meeting in general of the horizon and the vertical. So maybe the
Mm-hmm.
feeling of verticality or the feeling of something being horizontal. So the horizontal meeting the vertical, um, the
Yeah, yeah.
feeling of uprightness.
Yeah, I would say feeling of uprightness, also balance between verticality and horizontality. So lawful connection, almost like a feeling or a quality of mathematicality.
Yeah, yeah, quality of balance, organization, uprightness, horizontality, and
Transparency,
hmm,
clearness. Yeah.
right. We can measure it. We know exactly. We know pretty precisely what it is in
Mhm.
comparison to uh, the ecosystem of the Serengeti. Here we have a pretty clear idea, really pretty simple idea that has precision to it. So, yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Okay, so the next one is relation. What right angle is related? Well, first of all, to all different angles. I don't know how do you call these, like,
An acute angle or an obtuse angle.
yeah,
It's related to every other kind of angle by the fact that it's an angle. So it's a meeting of two sides. It's not a point, it's not a line in itself, it's not a three-dimensional object. Um,
by the way, when we speak about the right angle, does the light, does the lines include in that concept itself, or is the angle only the part there in which we could say the right angle is related to those lines that make that junction we call right angle?
mhm. Yeah, that's a good question. Is it possible to have an angle without the lines that make up the angle? I kind of like that because that takes us a little bit from the image
Uh-huh.
more toward the pure idea of, let's say, the forces between verticality and what's horizontal coming together. The relationship, though, I would say could be related to geometrical figures in
Yeah.
general, related to construction because you keep things when you're constructing a building. You want to keep things plumb like this, and you want to keep them level in this way. So being level
Mhm.
in order to like balance the gravity and to measure your your wood when you're cutting or metal when you're cutting things. The whole construction process is like oriented around this right angle.
Yeah, I would say also it's related to when four of these right angles come together, you get the whole 360 degrees. So it's also related to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was thinking that it doesn't just have to be. We think of the right angle as kind of looking like this in general. We have a narrow representation of it just like this, but actually could be could be turned on its side like that, where the one right angle becomes invisible, where you're looking down the one line,
Oh,
so
yeah.
to speak. So in that case, it looks identical to just a single vertical line. Or is it also possible then that you could have it turned the other way like that, so you'd only see one line?
Yeah.
The other line would be hidden behind the other horizontal line. So actually, depending on which way you're turning it,
Mhm.
okay, so it's related to different angles and different viewpoints, different
Yeah.
angles of view.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well. So the next one is place. Place
Yeah.
in space.
Mhm.
Place in space.
Yeah,
Position.
position. Yeah, where is it placed? Well, where is a right angle placed?
Well, I can see right angle there in front of me in this house. Scott's home, actually.
Yeah, so we see it in construction. We see it um, in picture frames.
Oh, yes, I can see it in my mathematical books.
Yeah, we see it all over the world. So it's not just a cultural.
Mhm.
It's not just uh, a particular culture that's using right angles, but we see that all over the world in construction and in geometry textbooks. Geometry is something that's universal, also not really coming from one culture.
Okay, so what about time?
Okay, time.
Time. When did right angle come into existence?
Yeah.
Was
well,
it there
I
before
know.
Pythagoras
Mhm.
and others found it? Well, we can say in one sense it, it was there before, and in the other sense it came about as a physical concept around that time. Who was the one who invented it? When was it invented? Like
Well,
500 before Christ or
yeah,
something
something
around
like that.
that
Yeah,
time?
500 BC or something like that. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like a fairly modern experience. I mean, it's not something that people were so concerned about, let's say, 30,000 years ago or something like that. I mean, it seems like it's kind of getting closer to our time. The idea of, you know, mathematical knowledge, modern scientific knowledge, ideas of verticality and being horizontal.
And we don't see so easily when the time of that concept will end. Like when does right angle become too old? Perhaps when we are living in I don't know, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional realities.
Yeah,
And
that's interesting. That's interesting. So maybe it has to do with living in 3 dimensions with our modern viewpoints about things. But in terms of when, it's also eternal. I mean, it's not like, well, there's only certain physical conditions only when it's hot out. I mean, right angles only come out when it's hot out. That doesn't make any sense.
or right angle only comes out when planet Earth exists in a physical plane.
Yeah, maybe, but it's kind of hard to say that. I mean, it doesn't have to do with time in the same way that you say, when does spring take place,
Yeah.
you know, or when do I have to go to the dentist? But rather, this is a form which is essentially outside of time and outside of space in its pure form. So I think that can lead us more toward the pure thinking when we get there.
Okay, so quantity, quality, relation, space and time, and then position. Yeah, we have already described that right angle can be this way or that way or whatsoever way. Basically, you can have that in 3 dimensions and rotate it in every different position. But we can see that we cannot change the angle because then it won't be the right angle.
Yeah, that's the one thing we
Right.
can't change. We could rotate it through. Actually, it's really helpful when you're trying to go from ordinary thinking to go to pure thinking, to go through a process of imaginative variation, like Edmund Husserl described in his phenomenology, to actually, in your thinking, rotate this form through every single possible every single possible gesture, and then to set aside all of those as not really being the true right angle. The true right angle doesn't have any particular gesture, but only, like you were saying before, it's really only the 90-degree relationship between two lines, but it doesn't matter what the orientation of it is. So then we have activity and passivity. Does this come next? So what's active in the right angle? Wow.
You mean when right angle acts?
Yeah.
When it is when is it active? I would say when it is in a relationship with other geometrical processes, and not other. When it's part of an ongoing. But is it still active, or am I still or am I then active in myself and just use right angle?
Yeah, I think it can be active when you're thinking about physical forces. So if we're talking about construction, I mean, looking at a house, the way that the forces are balanced between holding up the roof and keeping the wall supporting, that seems to be active continuously. So you've got the balance of forces that's taking place.
Oh yeah.
But in terms of, okay, you could say it's a part of a larger geometrical figure, but is it active there? I mean, it's part of it, but is being part of something active?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question for thinking. So this whole process, we're not just trying to describe it abstractly. I mean, that's not the final goal for this, but we're trying to use this clarity of thinking to bit by bit experience the pure thinking process itself.
So when it is acted upon, so passivity is when I am using right angle in a geometrical calculations, or when I am designing a house and put there those right angles, whereas like Scott said, right angle is active when it is, for example, balancing two papers that I put together like that in a right angle, and that angle supports those papers from falling down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's when is the right angle receiving something? I mean, when is it receiving something in passivity? I mean, you could almost say that when it receives any kind of form at all, like any kind of in particular way that it's set up,
Uh-huh.
it's almost like, well, it's not almost like, but I would say that the pure concept itself is taking on a form when it's put into particular wood or metal, or having a particular orientation, or being made out of paper, or being drawn on a paper in geometry class, or being projected, or seeing a video, or seeing a three-dimensional illustration. Is it receiving something there? I mean, it's kind of difficult to say when is it acting, or when is it receiving something. It's not like an animal that's nibbling on my toes, or me receiving the bite on my toes from a wild critter.
Yeah, so we have still one more, which is possession. What does right angle possess?
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of possessions. It's kind of like a pretty light traveler. I mean, doesn't have any suitcases with it, doesn't have any no luggage, no girlfriend, no boyfriend. It's just a loner. I mean, it's got a right angle, it's got two lines, and that's all it needs, baby.
Yeah, and even we could question the need of these two lines. But in any case, even the space there in geometrical forms, I don't think it even possesses those. I think it possesses the lawfulness that it is in itself.
Yeah, and I think that takes us then to the substance, or to the being itself, to the pure concept of what is the right angle. So you see, we've looked at it through all these different angles of interpretation of thinking, looking at this simple idea from all around, and we see that it's this meeting place of two forces which we're interacting with in human knowledge. So I don't think that chimpanzees or dolphins are really going to use the right angle. Plants are not really interested in the right angle. Yes, we might see an approximation of it in certain forms of nature, but we're not. It's really it's something that's useful for humans, and it's, I think, related to the uprightness of standing up, of the human being standing upright, and then standing on the earth. So I would say it's the essence of this is coming out of the human experience of standing on the earth and possessing an eye. So I think it is related to the planet Earth, to the particular incarnation we're in at this time. Anything
Okay.
else?
I don't seem to find anything else except as what you described already, an ideal relationship, a balanced relationship between these two spaces, verticality and horizontality, and that uprightness that sticks from this horizontality.
Hmm. And then we have how does it become? How is it changing? And there, I mean, I think that in this case, it's me who has to change. My thinking has to change when I'm thinking about the orientation of the right angle, but is it itself changing? I mean, it doesn't seem to be changing. It doesn't seem to be evolving. I mean, maybe the human is evolving in their relationship between standing firm on the earth and the eye rising up to give a place where where thinking can happen.
I would say
Is it changing?
also, I would say also that becoming future of the right angle could change according to changes of laws of three-dimensionality or where human is in his consciousness. So, for example, I could consider living in a reality where you have straight lines, but they don't look like this simple.
Hmm.
But the world or my mind, our spirit would live in a world that doesn't have that a stickness or fixedness we have in our physical three-dimensional reality, but we could still have there the lawfulness of right angle as some sort of balancing factor.
Hmm. And then how does it change into nothingness? So if we have looked at its being and its becoming, now we want to look at it how it disappears, how it becomes nothing. So this is a nice transition zone from where we have mental pictures, where we have representations in our memory of particular forms of the right angle that we've seen and made out of certain materials.
Mhm.
But now we're trying to let that disappear. What happens when the right angle disappears? How does it become nothing? And I think this is inviting us really to see the difference between looking at a particular shape of a right angle on our mental image plane in our mind's eye, and then erasing the image that's on our canvas that we paint on. So we erase it from there and watch all of the possible forms disappear of the right angle so that we follow our mental images into a pure understanding, the pure meaning of these two forces meeting.
Wow. And if I add on that, I would say the nothingness of right angle would be also to erase that idea, that understanding of the lawfulness, which seem to be present even though I'm not thinking in pictures or any representation. So, but when I turn in my thinking to this non-representable space where I know that I'm thinking about the right angle, what I'm approaching is more a light, a pure understanding of what right angle is, which I approach as some sort of light meaning filled form in my thinking space.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would say that as we transition from looking at a particular mental image to grasping this understanding of the right angle, we we experience that we have to become the relationship of these two forces. So we, in meeting the essence of the right angle in pure thinking, we have to leave this viewer consciousness where we're just standing outside of things and looking at them outside of ourselves as a subject looking at an object. The pure thinking actually unites the object and the subject, so it's intuitive. It's intuitive in the sense that we're actually using our meaning eye, our organ of intuition, our organ of thinking, to look directly into the essence of these two forces coming together. But when we do that, we understand it because we unite in that moment with this harmony, with this universal harmony, this meeting of two forces, of a force coming from the right, let's say, or from the left, and the force which allows us to rise up. So we have this rising force really going to the center of the top of the universe, and this force that goes down to the center of the earth, or to the center of the universe, to where the turtle is supporting the whole universe, and then the width that goes out on the left and out on the right, and we become this crossroads.
So when I follow you, I realize that, oh my God, to be able to think there in this IP plane, which we are now have been reaching, I cannot stay passive and wait that something just approaches me, because I realize that it is I who need to think there, who need to be active there. And at the same time, when Scott was speaking about these two forces, I realized that yes, I need to, in my thinking, become these two forces and that lawfulness that I can really understand what this concept is about. And when I do that, it is that I am not seeing something from outside, but I am seeing myself becoming that crossroad that Scott was speaking about. And I could see how the lawfulness, how actually the whole thought world, the whole IP is filled with such a lawfulness around it, inside it, above it, well, you name it. And there is this light of truth that I can observe there, as if shining from within this substance of lawfulness that I am also creating while I am observing it, which is this right angle.
Yeah, I think that's great, and that's showing you, just to summarize here, showing you that what a concept is really can't be explained in words, but we're rather using our words to point to a place where everybody can think. Everybody can think of the right angle, but this experience, when thinking, the pure meaning sees what's happening there, and we find that the concept of the right angle is a transition zone. So in pure thinking, we use those forces to then approach the spiritual world, rather than our feeling, rather than our will, rather than visionary experiences. And we could see that if we were going to go further into anthroposophical experience here, we would have to bring this more into the heart, and we would have to experience the real shock of meeting the threshold, which is a moral experience, and requires self-knowledge to a higher degree than this like preparatory path of pure thinking that we outlined here. But this is the kind of things we do to try to sharpen our thinking for the Michaelic Yoga.
Because if we know these regions through our own experience and can activate that at our will, we can realize what is truth from within the process itself. And then when we approach these spiritual experiences, we are not, so to speak, bound to interpretations coming from outside, or any teacher, or any dogmatic knowledge, or whatsoever systems we interpret our experiences. But such thinking can be there on top of that experience, at the heart of that experience, showing the knowledge, the meaning of the experience itself.
And just as the final word, this is where you start to wake up into your own spiritual individuality. This is what the philosophy of freedom is all about. by Rudolf Steiner, where the I wakes up in this process of being inside the pure concept, and that I see myself as a spiritual being and not just a physical being. So thanks a lot, Jeremy, and thank you.
See you next time.